the Sound, South Puget Sound.
Nice, very fun.
You get to see sea otters and harbor seals and great blue herons.
Tricia Sears, I'm rolling.
Hi.
Thank you for your time. Jordan Carey, Tricia Sears. Tricia, what's your job title here at the Washington Geological Survey?
I'm a Geologic Planning Liaison.
Okay, and what does that mean? Let's walk a little bit as we talk here. So that planning liaison, does that mean you're kind of a communicator between various groups?
Yeah, exactly. One of the things the survey recognized quite a few years ago was while they have really intelligent and brilliant scientists and produce great things, is that maybe there were some audiences and people and places that they weren't quite connecting with.
Okay.
And so to help better share out the information they have, they thought about having a person who more specialized in that, right? Rather than just having the geologist be the one with that responsibility.
Sure.
And so they put together a position called a Geologic Planning Liaison and put it out with the idea that we could better connect our best available science information to land use planners at local and city and tribal jurisdictions, and also connect better with other state agencies about the information that we have, and that we could hear from them about the kind of information they might need or need more understanding of.
So are you initiating all these conversations, or are people coming to you not knowing who they should talk to, or a little of both maybe?
Yeah, it's a little of both. I've been in this position now over 3 years. And so it's been super fun to have started in a position that was newly created.
Yeah.
And like, well, what do? You know, you have a vision, but how do you manifest that? And so, it's a lot of me reaching out and kind of joining conversations and people and places, sometimes being in situations of, well, hi, who are you and why are you in this conversation? To which I was always very excited to say, thanks for the question.
Right.
Let me tell you about that.
Yes.
One of the things I do, I work with the Landside Hazards team and the post-wildfire debris flow team.
Oh.
Of course. Right now, Thurston County is one of the counties that we're just wrapping up the research for their inventory of susceptibility and landslides.
Okay, we've stumbled onto something here.
Uh-oh.
So this guy is going to be doing some mapping of landslides in Thurston County from now until July 1st. What was your role with Thurston County to this point with the landslide stuff?
Our team has been doing the research and mapping of the maps in Thurston County, and we're about to put out a publication about that.
Oh.
And so my role is I'm not doing the mapping of the landslides.
Right.
But I'm helping with the conversation because Thurston County is very thoughtful and proactive and wanted to talk about how could this information be transferred and implemented into their code provisions, and looking at maybe making some changes in the language in their zoning code about when people need to get a geotechnical review on their property if they're proposing development.
So Thurston, am I hearing you right? Thurston County contacted the Washington Geological Survey for some help or some clarification or?
For some help to do a map project.
I see.
Right, and so we said, yeah, we can do the mapping work. And along the way, Thurston County staff has been like, well, gosh, all these landslides, you know, what are we going to do with this information? How are we going to take this back to our county commissioners?
Okay.
And what are we going to do with it? Do we need to change our code provisions?
Yes.
And so we've had conversations around that. Like, we just had a meeting recently looking at the map, drafted map.
Right.
And talking about, like, you know, well, this is where we found more steep slopes, and this is where we found more landslides, and kind of the different aspects of geology. And so thinking about, could you do some different, perhaps geographic references in your code?
Yes.
Right? So different kinds of review or different pieces of information would be more specific to that area. In turn, thinking about how if you have a really sort of broad code, people are like, oh man, everybody has to do a geotechnical review, like, and that's expensive and frustrating.
Right.
And so if they could craft it more specific to the scientific data, then maybe some additional people have to get a geotechnical review because they found more landslides.
Sure.
But maybe less people have to get a geotechnical review, or if they do, it's more specific to the needs of that area. right? It's more like, well, for this kind of thing, we need this kind of information. Over here, we don't need some of that information because it's different. And so just kind of looking at how that could happen, what kind of language to use, how you could present that idea to both the public and the political entities that need to support that. Yeah.
I mean, that's slick. And I don't know, did you have a relationship already with people at Thurston County? How did they know to contact you guys?
Yeah, I think we've had a couple of different interactions. I'm not sure what Mitch's and Kate's experiences are with Thurston County before that.
Yeah.
But I know that their staff has been around for a while, so I'm sure we've had communication with them. But also, they were doing a natural hazard mitigation plan about 2 years ago, I think now. And we did a presentation as part of their natural hazard mitigation plan about geologic hazards and land use planning and how those two should be talking to each other.
Yes.
And so that was a little different staff than who we're interacting with now, but they're all related. And so it was like, yeah, we've kind of got the, geologic people, we've got the planners, they're kind of all having dialogue together, and that's beautiful. That's what we hope for, honestly.
I can see your role now. I can see your role now, Tricia. You're right. You're a necessary part of this equation. And
when it's put into terms of landslide, something I understand, I think, a little bit, it really illuminates, I think, the importance of your position, as I'm hearing right now, right? Like, the landslide group goes out, maps a bunch of landslides, and then you kind of come in as like the enforcer. Not the enforcer. That seems too intimidating and scary. But like let's work together. Yeah, the translator, right? Let's all work together to interpret this map, and how can your city or your county or whatever make it work. It's amazing that at some point your position didn't exist.
Well, it took them 10 or 12 years, they told me, to kind of get this together and get it through and approved by the legislature. Yeah. So it's super exciting for them to see that kind of come into fruition, right? And get people aboard. But yeah, that sort of translation collaborator, being the person who asks the obnoxious questions even sometimes, right? Like poke, okay, great, this is beautiful. What are you going to do with it?
Exactly. Yeah. Because maybe the geologists are all just excited about the landslides or whatever, and then you can kind of parse out the...
Yeah, and the planners are kind of horrified because they're like, oh my God, there's so many more landslides now.
Yeah,
right. We already have people come in and go, oh, I have to get a geotech report. Like, what are we going to do now? And sort of trying to work that out.
Ease that anxiety a little bit.
Right, and really hear like what's going on with you in those planning situations. What do you think would be a solution, or what kind of other information would make it easier or more thoughtful for you to make decisions about how and what you approve and what you look at. So it's like trying to give the tools to the planners. Most planners, I'm generalizing, don't have a lot of geologic background, right? As a planner, though, it's very multidisciplinary. You've got to look at housing, transportation, housing. You've got all these things you've got to look at. So, of course, you can only be an expert in some of those things. So looking at geologic, it's often the kind of thing where it's like, I've got a geologic report. That's great. We're good. And so it's like kind of getting the information that would help them feel more comfortable and more informed about what's going on in the land, right? And again, rethinking like, how do you do your provisions? Because you could make them tiered. You can make them in different ways so that there's different levels of information required to sort of ease that burden of everyone just getting the same kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is a fact sheet that I created.
You created this, okay.
Yeah, because again, like, who am I? What am I? I'm some kind of odd unicorn who's running around at the Geologic Survey.
Yeah.
A lot of places have public information officers, right? So that's not uncommon. But again, having someone like myself who's like very specifically linked to the planning aspects seems to be unusual. So I crafted a kind of Geologic and Planning Washington fact sheet to share out with people about just maybe some common questions, some, of course, laws about growth management in Washington, and how there's this legal framework that jurisdictions have to actually look at their geologic hazardous areas and identify them, and then set up code provisions related to it. And so we have that. I have a web page that has a little bit more information. And there is, if you don't mind, I did note our survey's mission and vision, which I love because it just really, to me, helps connect the geology to the land use. So the mission of WGS is to collect, develop, use, distribute, and preserve geologic information to promote the safety, health, and welfare of the citizens of Washington, protect the environment, and support its economy. So we're looking at it in a holistic way. But for the vision, fostering a safer, more productive, and resilient society that incorporates geology into its regular thought and decision-making process. And that's something that really resonates with me because again, coming out of like natural hazard mitigation planning, environmental land use planning and things, it's like all these things are connected to each other.
Right.
Right? And so you find, it's funny, I think about sometimes efficiencies. Okay, you've got to do a natural hazard mitigation plan. You're going to do a climate plan, you have to do a comp plan. It's really cool when they talk to each other, right? And you go, oh, we talked about that over there. There's this science information and we're going to plug it in and relate it to over here. You don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Right.
Right? You get a level of efficiency. You also get the people connected together and kind of like, oh, well, Sally and Bob, I didn't know you guys wanted that thing too, right? We could all use that kind of map.
Yes.
Or we could all use that thing. And so when you go and talk to your policymakers and the other people with budgets and purses and things, you can find an efficiency in the sense of like, well, if we spring for this project, if we do this thing, we get all of these groups aboard, right? Which is efficient.
Building, many of you guys are, so this is the home of Washington Geological Survey right here with a
Yes, in the Natural Resources Building, yeah.
Okay. And it's at least once a month that most everybody gets together. Like Jordan and I were here last month and really enjoyed the energy that was in that room.
Oh, thank you, yeah.
Do you have a team that are doing similar things to you, or is it right back to that same message we were just talking about, like you're a team of one?
I am a team of one, it's just me.
Okay.
I currently have a Civic Spark fellow,
Okay.
and she's working with me on a project, which is very exciting, and I'm really glad to have her.
Good.
It's might sound boring to some people, but a deep dive on geologically hazardous area code provisions. So
Okay.
for all 320 jurisdictions in the state of Washington, so cities and counties, what do they actually have in their codes? And we set up 64 questions to answer yes, no, and then with some other things so we could get a qualitative and quantitative sense of these code provisions. Let's see if we can. There you go.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that we could say, like, 42 out of 320 have this in their code, and then have kind of the qualitative aspects that we can throw in for analysis, like, well, there's these quirks or these other special things about it. So that takes a fair bit of time, but it's really going to give a very nice and comprehensive assessment of what people have. It's already come into great use for me, as I'm often getting questions like, well, do you have an example of that? Or is there another jurisdiction that does X, Y, Z?
Oh, right. I'm sure there's that.
And so,
What is that county doing? Are we really supposed to do, or can we do it as good as they did it, or whatever?
And I was like, even just this morning, I had a conversation with the jurisdiction, and I was like, there's a city and a county. I was like, they have codes like that already. You could just borrow from them. And the guy was like, oh, that's so cool. I'm going to talk to them next.
Right.
And it's like, that's wonderful. So that's a really cool project with another goal after that, after getting this sort of assessment set up and established, that I want to take it further and produce a guide to geologically hazardous areas for Washington. And so there'll be like example codes, kind of recommended things that you should have in your code and your comprehensive plan, and
I see.
things to look for, kind of thing.
Yep.
Yeah. So I did that in Oregon when I worked for the state there. We did one specific to landslides. So we produced kind of a bigger document, and then we produced like a quick reference, which was really easy then for people to be like, oh, here's the 12 things for making a strong land use code about geologic hazard areas or something. And that was very well received. Because a guide, it's not, we have to do it like this.
Right.
Right? So they get the examples and they get the information, and then they can kind of craft it to be specific to their jurisdiction.
Nice.
I've found that to be the most successful way.
Yeah. What percentage of your projects are hazards related? Almost all, or not really?
Quite a lot. I mean, I also have climate change and like mineral resource lands. So
Oh, I see.
as kind of my subject portfolio. So I do a lot of things related to those two things as well.
And you're truly spread across the state with the districts and with your projects. It's not a Western Washington focus. It truly is the.
It's truly the entire state.
Yeah.
Any county can ask me the questions or ask me. I'm on a Franklin County Natural Hazard Mitigation Committee Mitigation Plan Committee right now. I'm
Okay.
on, some western side ones. We're doing a project in Grant County for aggregate resources.
Oh, you are.
So we're talking about things with them. Just had a conversation with San Juan County about aggregate resources.
What's aggregate resource? Is that
It's like sand and gravel.
sand and gravel?
Yeah.
Okay. Ice Age floods country has a lot of sand and gravel.
Yeah, so people have that as roads, bridges, buildings, and in terms of land use planning, those things have to be identified in a jurisdiction. Where are they? And how are they having code provisions? The entire state hasn't actually been mapped to that level of detail. And so we are going kind of county by county to make county level maps about aggregate resources. The county we worked on before before Grant County was Spokane.
Okay.
And Spokane County was really interesting because there are so many mines.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of more like, I don't know if people are more accepting of it necessarily, but in terms of land use, like people see the mines and they see all the jobs related to it, and it's a more common thing. In some of the other counties we work with, it's more, people are more vociferous in their opposition
Yes.
to mining.
That's a polite way to say it.
Yeah, and aggregate resources. So kind of like it's useful to know where they are. Is your county, does it have a lot? Are you going to have to transport them in from somewhere else? That becomes exponentially more expensive for you to bring in aggregate resources from beyond 25 miles from where you are. So.
Tricia, you're doing great. How about two more things?
Okay.
This is a pretty attractive map, and it's just a draft of a map, but can you tell us what the purpose of something like this is, this walk time tsunami evacuation business, and might you be involved in this in any capacity?
Yeah, we all, one of the brilliant things of working at the survey is for any publication, map or written document, there's typically a review week, and so all the folks in our division can sit here and comment and notice things. And I think that's really nice, as I think if I, coming in from a little different perspective, not being a geologist, then I find sometimes different language or different things to ask the question about and cause them to go, maybe we should say that differently, or maybe we should put a different symbol or something.
Okay.
In terms of the community interaction, it's usually our tsunami team goes out and is usually working with the emergency management folks of the jurisdiction.
Okay.
And these maps have been super well received.
Oh, yeah. You're literally, like if you live in South Bend and a tsunami arrives, am I reading this correctly? These numbers are the number of minutes you have to walk to safety?
Yeah, and then we have our little symbols here, and so it's really cool when you get to see 15 minutes. And they have kind of that average person pace.
Yeah.
I think right there, like a 24-minute mile. So we try to say what we consider that average pace. And so if you're faster or slower, then you adjust your estimate accordingly. They use the stopwatch to say, that's about how much time it took you to cover that distance. So you kind of calculate out how long it might take you yourself to have that pace.
Wow.
And I thought it was just like a brilliant demonstration.
Totally.
Right? That you could interactively be like, oh, I think I walk fast. Maybe I'm not fast enough, or whatever your thought process is.
I'm thinking back to my middle school mile times.
Yes.
How does that relate, and how long could I keep that going now? I probably overestimate.
Yeah.
It's not competitive, Jordan.
Right. Should have thought to pull it up beforehand, but let's see if I can get my screen up first.
I've always meant to do more with these walk maps in my geology.
Yeah, they're awesome.
Have you used them at
I
all?
was unaware of them until we came here a month and a half ago.
A month and a half ago.
Wow.
Whenever that was. I did not know
Are you done with your earthquake unit?
I finished today.
Jordan.
I know. I know.
All right, I did actually pull it up.
Oh, great.
Who knew I was so thoughtful in planning in advance?
Hey, you're a planner. Nice.
Yeah, so this is the website. I do find our website is fairly easy to navigate, I think. You know, publications, data, geologic planning. So I've got a couple different fact sheets that you can check out.
Okay.
Geologic planning, aggregate resource mapping, like we were just talking about,
Right.
and landslide hazards. So these are kind of the more common ones in terms of questions that I often receive. We did a nice geologic mapping in Washington fact sheet because our geologists will be oftentimes looking to go on private property, right, to kind of look at things. And so they do literally call or knock on the door of places and they're like, hi, we're going to do this geologic mapping. Is that okay? So we thought having a fact sheet would be kind of cool.
Good.
So I just have these categories. What is geologic planning and why would we have it here at Washington Geological Survey? Geologic planning and growth management. So talking about the statewide Growth Management Act and how we relate to that, and then where we can actually contribute to land use planning efforts, and in particular with critical areas. Excited to share out information. It's funny, I've had a number of people say like, wow, you're just the right person for this role and this job.
Yes, you are.
You know, sort of a funny mix of my experience and whatever. And so, but I think that lends itself to a nice level of comfort in being in a space that we haven't gone into before.
Right.
Right. And trying to bring these things together and just find the common ground for people to have conversation around, and that geology is not scary. It is largely unknown for a lot of people. Like as kids, everybody's like, cool rock.
Right.
And then you sort of get to be a grown up and you're like, well, how does that relate to my life?
Right.
And so it's really nice to have the opportunity to share out how it does relate to your life in so many ways every day. So thank you.
Tricia, thank you. Great job.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.